Hi, this is Danny from T&D Productions. It's a new time for South Korea. They have just elected their 20th president. So to get insight on this new president, I asked Mike Cannon of the podcast Red Star Over Asia to tell us a little bit about him. This is what he had to say. But before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more information that may affect the expat community worldwide. I'm here with Mike here. Hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. And I asked you to answer a few questions about not our new president, but the new president of South Korea.
Well, yeah, he is we can't legally vote, but he is our new president. Functionally. It's definitely going to impact us living here in South Korea.
Right, and what's his name?
Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon Suk-yeol was the main candidate for the biggest primary center-right opposition party, People Power Party, and he won a very narrow victory over Lee Jae-myung, who was the candidate for the Democratic Party, Moon Jae-in's party. So in South Korea, presidents have one 5-year term. You cannot run again. So Moon Jae-in was ineligible to run for a second term. So Lee Jae-myung was the candidate for his party and lost a very narrow election. And we saw the highest, possibly the highest turnout of an election, over 80%, since South Korea's return to formal electoral democracy in 1987. And again, this was a very, very close race. It is the closest race since that 1987 in modern South Korean history, essentially.
While this was going on, I saw lots of campaign posters, had different numbers of the different candidates. I think it went up to 14 different candidates.
Yeah, so, you're American, I'm American. In the U.S., we have the Republican and Democratic parties.
Right.
I mean, we have third minor parties, but they have no real viability.
They're not really major like they are here.
But in South Korea, there are actual viable third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties that have representation in the National Assembly, the equivalent of Congress, basically. So the Korean National Assembly, most of those positions are first past the post. The majority candidate wins to be your kind of local district representative, but there is also a proportional representation part of that. So that means that minor parties like the main left party, Justice Party, have representation in the National Assembly primarily due to that proportional representation function. So yeah, we had way more than 2 candidates in this presidential election. And one thing that upset things was, so again, I mentioned this was a tight race, very polarized, between Lee Jae-myung and Yoon Suk-yeol from the Conservative Party. Yoon has won. He is now the president-elect. He will take office in May. I would say the general mood in the South Korean social movements and the South Korean left is one of disappointment and disillusionment with the past 5 years of Moon. And I think that was a factor in this election. And one thing that I think that really defined the campaign was it wasn't so much that you had fervent supporters on each side. It was more about what drove the campaign was fear of the other side. So it's not like people were like, I love Lee Jae-myung, he's going to be great. I love Yoon, he's going to be great. It was more about the other person is so terrible, we have to stop them.
Yes.
And I mean, it was kind of ridiculous, the mudslinging that went on, people's wives getting dragged in to stuff, and it was kind of a dark campaign that was not, and all of the actual voter concerns. If you look at the polling, most South Korean voters are concerned about things like housing prices, youth unemployment, youth underemployment, etc. All of that stuff got pushed into the background because of this sort of circus of mudslinging drama, and I think that's really sad that actual what working class people here in this country are concerned about was not talked about enough in the campaign.
Speaking of things pushed aside, we're expats here, and most of the expats in South Korea are teachers at private academies. And I remember last time when there was a conservative president, Park Geun-hye, she wanted to redo the whole academy system, which was a big concern for a lot of the teachers here. Has Yoon said anything about that?
No, he hasn't. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't said anything specifically about the Hagwon system. But I will say this: I think it was kind of a good move that they cracked down on this, because you shouldn't, like, kids who happen to be born into wealthy families should not get better educations than poor kids.
Right.
Yeah.
How about North Korea and its imposing on South Korea, or relationship between South Korea and North Korea? Has he said anything about that?
Well, that's a really good question. So Moon Jae-in is from the Democratic Party.
Right.
Historically, Democratic Party presidents have been more open to engagements with North Korea.
Right.
I think Yoon is going to, unfortunately, pursue a very aggressive policy with North Korea, and I'm honestly a little concerned what the consequences of that may be over the next 5 years.
Right now we're in an uncertain part of history now with the coronavirus and everything.
Right.
Has Yoon said anything about the stricter restrictions for coronavirus?
I mean, kind of. I mean, he's made vague comments. I mean, he's a conservative candidate, so a lot of the tenor and like the focus of his campaign was about small businesses, which I mean, I think everyone has sympathies for that. I mean, the real one of the worst things about this pandemic is like the
small businesses.
One of the greatest things about South Korea is these little like mom and pop restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. Those have been the people who've been hit the most by the pandemic, and he has criticized the incumbent government, Moon Jae-in administration, for being too harsh with the lockdowns or whatever. But he's also been restrained because it's really hard to criticize South Korea's response to the coronavirus.
Right.
I mean, you're American, like me, living here compared to the shit show that happened in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's night and day. I mean, now Omicron is spreading like wildfire. Like, everybody's got it. Numbers are out of control, et cetera. But we never had an actual lockdown. We never did. Yeah. And I think that's why Yoon's criticism of the current incumbent administration was so restrained, because you can't really say that much. But no, I think probably Yoon is going to be, if I have to speculate a little bit, because none of these candidates really said anything concrete about it, but I think Yoon's going to open things up much more quickly than maybe Lee Jae-myung would have had he been elected. Because I think the People Power Party, the main right-wing conservative party, is much more sensitive to and responsive to pressure from like business, like capital, finance, etc. And there's a lot of pressure to open things up as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah.
So I think what we'll probably see.
Anyway, you want to take your time right now to plug your podcast?
Oh yes, thank you for that. All right. So yeah, I co-host a podcast called Red Star Over Asia, along with several of my comrades here in South Korea. We cover Asian history, politics, social movements from an explicitly socialist, Marxist perspective. So we have a good time doing that. So you can check us out. We're on Spotify, YouTube. Look us up on Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Yeah, and also we'll put a link down below and
all right.
to one of those. All right, well, thank you very much for taking your time today.
Yeah, thank you for coming over to my house. It's been a pleasure having you here.
No problem with that. No problem. You have a nice house.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, you have a nice day.
All right, you too, brother.
You too. Okay, bye.
I'll see you soon.
Thanks to Mike Cannon for giving us a little insight into this new president. You can check him out on his podcast, Red Star Over Asia. That can be found on many, many different platforms, and we'll leave a link to it down below in the comments. If you found this video informative, don't forget to smash that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. What do you think about the next 5 years in South Korea? Do you think this president will have a big impact to the world? How do you think expats will be affected by this new president? Leave a comment down below. Tell us what you think. Well, I'm Danny, and this has been T&D Productions. As always, may the Force live long and prosper with you until all are one. Bye-bye.